Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. Ted Wilson's wrench slipped for the third time, his knuckles smashing against the rusted underbelly of Mr. Henderson's 1978 Ford F-150. Blood beaded along his index finger as a string of curses erupted from his lips. "Son of a..." He sucked the injured finger, tasting motor oil and defeat. "Henderson, when was the last time you changed this oil filter?" "The Reagan administration." Frank Henderson, a weathered rancher pushing 70, spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the garage floor. "Truck runs fine. You city mechanics are always looking for problems where there ain't none." "I'm from Cheyenne, not New York," Ted muttered, wiping sweat from his brow with his forearm. "And this isn't fine, it's automotive abuse." The clock on the garage wall read 7:42 p.m. Ted had promised to close up by 6:00, but Henderson's quick oil change had morphed into a full-blown rescue mission. The ancient pickup seemed determined to take Ted's Friday night down with it. "Listen," Ted said, sliding out from under the truck. "I've replaced what I can, but that transmission is on borrowed time. You're looking at maybe 2 months, tops." Henderson fished a wad of crumpled bills from his pocket. "Here's for the oil, you keep your doom prophecies." Ted accepted the money with a grimace. "Don't say I didn't warn you when you're stranded on Route 16 in January," he added after Henderson disappeared in a cloud of exhaust smoke that definitely didn't meet emission standards. Ted locked up Blackwater Auto Repair and trudged to his beat-up Chevy Silverado. Its dented blue hood reflected the setting Wyoming sun as he climbed inside, wincing at the pain in his lower back. The 10-minute drive to his house on the outskirts of Blackwater, population 863, took him past miles of open prairie, with distant mountains cutting purple silhouettes against the darkening sky. Ted's thoughts drifted to the cold beer waiting in his fridge and the stack of unopened bills on his kitchen counter. His small ranch house appeared on the horizon, single-story, with a slightly crooked front porch and white paint peeling at the corners. Nothing special, but it was his. Well, his in the banks for another 22 years. As Ted pulled into his gravel driveway, he spotted movement on the porch railing. The squirrel, his arch nemesis, sat there defiantly clutching half a peanut butter sandwich Ted had left on the windowsill that morning. "You little thief!" Ted shouted through his open window. The squirrel stared back, unimpressed, before scampering up the oak tree with its prize. "Yeah, run, Ted," he muttered, but this meant war. Inside, Ted tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl his mother had made in her pottery phase before cancer took her 3 years ago. The house smelled stale, with hints of last night's microwave burrito lingering in the air. He flicked on the lights and headed straight for the fridge, extracting a can of Core Light and cracking it open with a satisfying hiss. The first sip eased the tension in his shoulders. He switched on the radio, and Waylon Jennings filled the small kitchen. Ted hummed along, his mood lifting as he surveyed his domain. Dishes piled in the sink, mail scattered across the table, and a calendar showing a mountain lake hanging crookedly on the wall. July 2023. He'd need to update that someday. Ted's muscles ached from hunching under Henderson's truck. The idea of a hot bath crystallized in his mind, the one luxury he allowed himself after particularly grueling days. He wandered to the bathroom, turned the faucets to full blast, and dumped in a generous amount of the bubble bath his sister Jenny had given him as a joke last Christmas for her perpetually single brother. The card had read something witty. Steam filled the small bathroom. As Ted returned to the kitchen, he prepared his bath time ritual. A tall glass of ice-cold lemonade spiked with a splash of vodka, his waterproof radio tuned to the country station, and a fresh towel from the dryer. Back in the bathroom, the tub had filled nicely, a mountain of foam waiting invitingly. Ted set his lemonade on the edge of the tub, placed the radio on the toilet tank, and cranked up Dolly Parton singing about working 9 to 5. He stripped down, tossing his oil-stained clothes into the hamper, and reached for the bathroom door to close it, a habit, though he lived alone. "All right, Henderson," he said to himself. "Time to wash your automotive sins off me." Ted turned toward the tub, naked and ready for relaxation, when he froze. The bubbles in his bathtub surged upward and then parted like a foamy curtain. Rising from the water was a woman. No, not exactly a woman. Her skin gleamed a rich shade of violet in the bathroom light. Crystalline structures adorned her head in what looked impossibly like a crown, glowing with internal blue-green light. Water cascaded down her body, her very naked, very alien body, as she stood in his tub, eyes wide with shock. Ted's brain misfired. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. The purple woman screamed, "First intruder!" Her voice rang with authority despite her panic. "You dare breach the royal bathing chamber!" Ted stumbled backward, knocking into the sink. "What the who the my bathing chamber?" The alien woman raised her arm, water dripping from her elbow, her face contorted with outrage. "Kneel before Princess Elenira Cavaris, a VTH heir to the crystalline throne of Salaran." Ted's brain finally connected to his limbs. He lunged for the towel rack, desperate to cover himself. "Lady, I don't care if you're the Queen of England, you're in my tub." He grabbed the towel, but in his haste his foot slipped on the tile. Ted pinwheeled backward, crashing into the shower curtain. The tension rod snapped free, and both Ted and the curtain collapsed in a heap. His lemonade glass tipped over, sending sticky liquid cascading across the bathroom floor. From his position on the ground, wrapped in a clingy plastic shower curtain like a terrified burrito, Ted stared up at the purple woman. She stood imperiously in his bathtub, seemingly unaware or unconcerned about her nudity. The crown on her head flickered, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the bathroom walls. "This vessel," the princess said, gesturing to the bathtub, "has been designated as temporary royal quarters by the Crown of Salaran. Explain yourself, human." Ted struggled to free himself from the shower curtain while maintaining some semblance of dignity. "Explain yourself, you're the naked purple alien in my bathtub." He finally extracted himself and wrapped the towel firmly around his waist, his heart pounding against his ribs as he backed toward the door. The alien princess watched him with what appeared to be both fear and authority, an unsettling combination. "I'm Ted," he said, surprising himself with the introduction. "This is my house, Earth, United States, Wyoming." The princess blinked, crystalline eyelashes catching the light. "Why, is that your kingdom?" "No, it's never mind. How did you get in my bathroom?" All Anra's regal posture faltered slightly. She touched the glowing crown on her head, and her expression shifted to something Ted recognized despite her alien features, uncertainty. "The emergency teleportation system," she said, her voice softer now. "The palace, there was an attack. Usurpers, I activated the crown's fail-safe while in my royal bath. It should have transported me to a secure location." She looked around the small bathroom, taking in the peeling wallpaper and the rubber duck sitting on the edge of the tub. Her shoulders slumped. "This is not the emergency bunker." "Kidding," Ted said. He inched toward the medicine cabinet and extracted a second towel, holding it out to her at arm's length. "Maybe you could, The princess looked at the towel with confusion. "Cover yourself," Ted suggested, keeping his eyes firmly fixed on her face. Why would a royal personage conceal herself from a servant? Despite her words, she accepted the towel, examining it curiously. "I'm not your servant, princess, and on Earth, we generally wear clothes when meeting new people." She wrapped the towel around herself, though not before Ted caught another glimpse of her distinctly non-human anatomy, similar to a human woman's but with subtle differences in proportion and patterns of lighter violet swirls across her skin. "This is impossible," she muttered, stepping carefully out of the tub. Water dripped onto his bath mat. "The Crown's targeting systems cannot malfunction. It should have located the nearest throne-like structure compatible with royal dignity," Ted remarked, glancing at his toilet then back at the princess. A horrible suspicion formed in his mind. "When you say throne-like structure," the crown on her head flickered violently, then dimmed. "Elanra," she gasped, clutching at the crystalline structure as if in pain. "No, the power cells, they're destabilizing," panic replaced her royal confidence. "Your primitive environment must be interfering with the photonic matrix." The crown sputtered, sending a cascade of sparks across her wet skin. Alan cried out, her knees buckling. Ted reacted instinctively, lunging forward to catch her before she hit the tile floor. His arms closed around her wet, towel-draped form as the crown gave one final flash, then went dark for a moment. They stayed frozen, Ted in his towel, supporting the unconscious alien princess in his arms, while Dolly Parton still sang cheerfully from the radio about working 9 to 5. "What a way to make a living," Ted muttered, echoing the lyrics. The princess stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttered open. They were a startling shade of magenta, with no visible pupils or whites, just swirling depths of color that reminded Ted of nebula photographs from the Hubble telescope. "My crown," she whispered. "It's dormant, is that bad? Catastrophic," she replied, pushing herself away from him to stand on unsteady legs. "Without its power, I cannot return to Salaran. I cannot contact my royal guard. I am." She swallowed the action, surprisingly human despite her alien appearance. "Stranded in Wyoming." "Ted," he corrected automatically, "not on." "That is your primary concern?" Her voice rose an octave. "I am a royal heir trapped on a primitive world while you usurpers seize my throne." Ted sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "Look, Princess, you will address me as your luminescent majesty, or Princess Elenira Cavaris, IVTH, beacon of the seven systems." "Yeah, that's not happening. Look, Princess Alana, I don't know what's going on, but you're dripping all over my bathroom floor. I've had a day from hell fixing Henderson's truck, and I really just wanted a damn bath." The princess drew herself up to her full height, which Ted noticed was impressively tall, maybe 62. "Your petty concerns are irrelevant. My crown requires recharging. The fate of an entire star system depends on my return." "And how exactly do you plan to recharge it?" Ted gestured vaguely at her head. "Whatever that is," Alanra touched the crown gingerly. "The photonic cells absorb specific wavelengths of energy. On Salaran, our three suns provide abundant power. Here, I will need to identify alternative sources." Ted leaned against the sink, feeling the evening slip further from his control. "So what you're saying is you're stuck here in my house for how long? Until the crown regenerates sufficient power for interstellar teleportation." She frowned in concentration. "Given the ambient energy readings, I'm detecting approximately 14 of your Earth days, 2 weeks." Ted's voice cracked. "You expect to stay in my bathroom for 2 weeks? Don't be absurd." "Alan," she scoffed, "I shall require appropriate quarters befitting my station, substantial nutrition, and your complete assistance in maintaining my security until the crown regenerates." Ted laughed a short, desperate sound. "Lady, I live alone in a 2-bedroom ranch house on a mechanic's salary. I eat frozen burritos 4 nights a week. What makes you think I can hide an alien princess?" Alanra's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering behind her imperial facade. "Because if you don't, the usurpers who overthrew my family will locate me, and your primitive planet will become collateral damage in an interstellar conflict you cannot comprehend." The bathroom fell silent, except for the radio now playing a commercial for Bob's Discount Furniture. "Well," Ted said finally, "when you put it that way." Ted straightened his shoulders, a newfound resolve settling over him. Princess or alien, she was still a woman in distress, and Ted Wilson was many things: overworked, underpaid, occasionally prone to arguing with squirrels, but he wasn't the kind of man who turned away someone who needed help, even if that someone had purple skin and believed his bathtub was royal property. "All right, Your Highness, let me get this straight. You need a place to stay for 2 weeks while your crown thing recharges, and if I don't help you, Earth might become a battleground in some space war." Alanra adjusted her towel with a dignity that seemed impossible given the circumstances. A succinct, if inelegant, summary. Ted nodded, surprising himself with a grin. There was something oddly exhilarating about the situation, like he'd stumbled into one of those sci-fi movies he watched on lonely Saturday nights. "I've got a spare bedroom. It's not exactly palace standards, but it's clean and I can loan you some clothes, unless you plan on wearing that towel for 2 weeks." The princess examined the terry cloth wrapped around her torso with obvious disdain. "This fabric is abrasive. On Salaran, royal skin touches only spun cloud silk and lunar cotton. Well, on Earth, royal skin's going to have to settle for target clearance and whatever my sister left behind last Christmas." Ted grabbed his bathrobe from the hook on the door. "Here, this might be more comfortable than the towel." He tossed her the faded blue robe. Alanra caught it with surprisingly quick reflexes, examining it with scientific curiosity. "The material is acceptable." She dropped her towel without warning, giving Ted another full view of her alien physique before slipping into the robe. He averted his eyes a moment too late, heat rising to his face. "We really need to work on your understanding of human modesty," he muttered. "Modesty is a construct of primitive societies," Alanira replied, cinching the robe's belt on. On Salaran, the royal body is considered a work of celestial art. Ted cleared his throat. Yeah, well, it's definitely artistic, but here on Earth we generally keep our art covered in public. He let her out of the bathroom, suddenly aware of how his small house would appear to someone used to palatial accommodations. The living room was cluttered with car magazines, a half-assembled model Mustang on the coffee table, and his ancient leather couch, with the duct-taped cushion to his surprise, moved through his home with fascination rather than disgust. She examined his television with particular interest, running her fingers along its frame. This appears to be a primitive transmission receptor. Do you receive imperial broadcasts? Just Netflix and basic cable, Ted replied, then shook his head. Look, you must be hungry. I don't have any, space food, but I could make you a sandwich. The nutritional supplements in my crown will sustain me for several days. Alanira's stomach growled audibly, the sound so unexpectedly human that Ted laughed. Sounds like your stomach disagrees with your crown. The princess placed a hand over her midsection, looking betrayed. How unusual. Perhaps the teleportation disrupted my metabolic stabilizers. Ted led her to the kitchen, pulling open the refrigerator door. Let's see what we've got. Leftover pizza, some eggs, half a block of cheddar, he said, reaching to the back for a mysterious Tupperware that he was afraid to open. Your food preservation unit is remarkably rudimentary, she observed, reaching past him to touch the refrigerator's interior light. On Salaran, our nutritional synthesizers create meals from pure energy. Well, here we make meals from whatever isn't growing mold in the fridge. Ted extracted the pizza box. Cold pizza it is, the universal language of midnight snacks. As they sat at his small kitchen table, Ted watched with amusement as the alien princess tentatively took her first bite of pepperoni pizza. Her eyes widened, the magenta swirls spinning faster. This is extraordinary. The flavor matrix is complex yet harmonious, she explained between larger bites. We have nothing like this on Curran. You're telling me an advanced alien civilization hasn't figured out pizza. Our nutrition is scientifically optimized for physical performance and longevity, she added. The concept of food as pleasure is unconventional. Then you're going to love ice cream, Ted grinned, finding himself oddly pleased by her reaction. As Alanra devoured the pizza with increasingly abandoned royal decorum, Ted considered his situation. There was a beautiful alien princess sitting at his kitchen table, wearing his bathrobe, eating leftover Dominoes. It was absurd, it was dangerous, it was the most interesting thing that had happened to him since, well, ever. For a guy whose social life consisted mainly of occasional beers with the other mechanics and awkward holiday dinners with his sister's family, suddenly sharing his space with a woman, alien or not, sent a surprising thrill through him. His empty house had never felt particularly lonely before, but now, with her animated presence filling the kitchen, he realized how quiet his life had been. So, he said, reaching for another slice, tell me about this coup on your planet. Who's trying to take your throne? All Anera's expression darkened. My uncle Dreth Cavaris, commander of the Stellar Fleet. He has coveted the crystalline throne since my father's ascension. With my parents attending the Galactic Congress on Zenthori Prime, he seized the opportunity to strike. Your parents are they unknown? She said, her voice tight. Communications were severed during the attack. I was in my royal chambers when the palace defenses were breached. My handmaid, Aiden, activated the Crown's emergency protocol just before the door was broken down. Ted's heart twisted with unexpected sympathy. Despite her haughty demeanor, she was essentially a refugee, alone, stranded, possibly orphaned. I'm sorry, he said simply. Aura looked up, seeming surprised by his sincere tone. For a moment, her royal mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable beneath. Your sympathy is appreciated, she said stiffly, then straightened her shoulders. But unnecessary. I am Princess Alanira Cavaris of ETH. I have been trained since birth to rule. I will reclaim my throne and make my uncle pay for his treachery. Ted nodded, admiring her determination. Despite everything, well, for the next 2 weeks your throne is my guest bedroom, and maybe we can figure out how to speed up that crown's recharging process. The crown on her head gave a weak flicker, as if responding to her emotions. Alanira touched it gently. The molecular structure has been compromised by your Earth water. The photonic cells require specific energy wavelengths to regenerate. Ted straightened, an idea forming. I'm a mechanic. I might not know alien technology, but I know energy systems. Maybe I can help you. Oh, look skeptical. This is advanced Salaran technology passed down through 17 generations of royalty. No offense intended to your, mechanical abilities, but this crown contains quantum algorithms beyond your comprehension. Try me, Ted challenged, a spark of confidence igniting within him. Cars might seem simple to you, but when you get down to it, energy is energy. Electricity, combustion, whatever powers that crown, it all follows rules. Alanira studied him with new interest, her head tilted slightly. Your confidence is either admirably brave or foolishly misplaced. I've been told that about my poker playing, too. Ted grinned. Look, what have you got to lose? If I can't help, you're no worse off. But if I can boost that crown's charging rate, you get home faster. The princess considered this, then inclined her head in a logical proposition. Very well, Ted of Wyoming, you may attempt to assist with the crown's restoration. Just Ted is fine among Curan royalty. Using only a person's primary designation is a sign of either intimate familiarity or deadly insult, she informed him primly. Ted leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at his lips. Which one are you going for? The question seemed to catch her off guard. A deeper purple color spread across her cheeks. She was blushing, Ted realized with fascination. That remains to be determined, she replied with surprising frankness. Ted laughed, feeling more alive than he had in months. An alien princess with a malfunctioning crown, an interstellar coup, an inexplicable flirtation across species, all on a Friday night in Blackwater, Wyoming. For a guy whose idea of excitement had been trying a new brand of beer, suddenly harboring an alien refugee felt like stepping into another dimension. And strangely, he didn't mind one bit. In fact, his house, which had always seemed adequate but empty, now hummed with possibility. Well, Princess Alanira Cavaris IVTH, Ted said, raising his beer in a toast. Welcome to Earth. Starting tomorrow, we're going to turn this mechanic's house into the strangest royal court this side of the Milky Way. The princess hesitated, then mimicked his gesture with her glass of water. Two unlikely alliances, she offered. Two unlikely alliances, Ted agreed, clinking his can against her glass. Outside, the Wyoming night spread its star-filled canopy over his small ranch house. Somewhere up there was Salaran, with its 3 sons, quantum technology, and royal intrigue. And for the next 2 weeks, or however long it took, his ordinary life would be anything but ordinary. Later that night, as Ted showed Alina to the guest bedroom, explaining the mysterious workings of light switches and the questionable artistic merits of his sister's crocheted blankets, he realized something surprising. He was actually looking forward to tomorrow. For the first time in years, he had no idea what the day would bring, and for a man whose life had become as predictable as an oil change schedule, that uncertainty felt remarkably like freedom. Ted woke to the sound of something shattering in his kitchen. He bolted upright, momentarily confused by the sunlight streaming through his bedroom window, Saturday, his day off. The events of the previous night crashed back into his consciousness. Alien princess, bathroom, interstellar coup, crap, he muttered, throwing off his covers and yanking on a t-shirt. He found Alanira standing amid the ruins of what had been his coffee maker, still wearing his blue bathrobe. The crown on her head glowed faintly, pulsing with weak blue light. I was attempting to analyze your primitive energy conversion device, she explained without a hint of apology. The internal components were surprisingly intricate. Ted surveyed the damage. Coffee grounds scattered across the linoleum, shards of glass glittering in the morning sun, and various mechanical components laid out with surgical precision on his countertop. That was a Mr. Coffee, not the Starship Enterprise, he groaned. And it was my only source of caffeine. Alanira lifted a small circuit board between her purple fingers. Fascinating how you've achieved rudimentary electronics with such limited resources. On Salaran, our children construct more advanced systems as educational exercises. Well, on Earth we construct coffee before attempting interspecies diplomacy, or cleaning up alien messes, Ted replied, grabbing the broom from the closet and beginning to sweep up the debris. Alanira watched with interest, her head tilted in that bird-like way he was beginning to recognize as her curious pose. You perform your own maintenance tasks without service drones? Welcome to middle-class America, princess. Ted, we're all our own service drones here, he said as he cleaned. Ted found himself acutely aware of how the morning light caught the subtle patterns on all of his skin, swirling designs that seemed to shift and move like slow-motion currents beneath the surface. He realized he was starring and quickly averted his eyes. We need to get you some clothes, he said abruptly, and figure out how to hide that crown. You can't exactly take you to Walmart looking like you escaped from Comic-Con. My royal regalia cannot be removed, Alanira informed him, touching the crystalline structure. It is molecularly bonded to my cranial energy meridians. Great, Ted sighed. How about a hat? 20 minutes later, Alanira sat at his kitchen table wearing a Wyoming Cowboys baseball cap, the crown awkwardly bulging beneath it, and a flannel shirt and jeans borrowed from his sister's forgotten clothes. The outfit is bizarrely charming on your tall alien frame, Ted observed. These garments are restrictive, she complained, tugging at the jeans. And why do humans require so many fastening mechanisms? These buttons seem unnecessarily complex. Ted poured cereal into bowls, trying not to smile at her frustration. Says the woman with quantum technology growing out of her head. The crown is an extension of my royal essence, not an accessory, she corrected, then eyed the colorful cereal dubiously. What nutrition does this provide? Mostly sugar and nostalgia. Ted slid a bowl toward her. But it's a sacred Earth breakfast ritual. To his surprise, Alanira approached the cereal with scientific solemnity, analyzing the milk-to-flake ratio before taking a careful bite. Her eyes widened. It creates a sweetened milk solution. The flavor transforms as the consumption process continues. She took another spoonful, clearly delighted. Your Earth scientists are cleverer than they appear. Ted laughed, leaning back in his chair. There was something oddly satisfying about introducing an alien princess to Lucky Charms, something intimate about sharing these small, ordinary pleasures. So what's the plan for your crown? He asked, tapping his spoon against his bowl. You said it needs specific wavelengths to recharge. Alanira nodded, setting down her spoon. The photonic cells require concentrated ultraviolet radiation, similar to your sun, but at precise frequencies. On Curran, our charging chambers would accomplish this in hours. Ted considered this. Ultraviolet like tanning beds. Those are basically UV light boxes, right? Tanning beds, places humans go to make their skin darker. There's a salon in town. Alanira's face brightened. Yes, that could provide the initial resonance needed to stabilize the quantum matrix. Ted grinned at her enthusiasm for all her royal hotness. There was something endearing about her when she got excited about technical possibilities. Looks like we're going to Paradise Tan and Nails, he said. But first, we need to work on your Earth Girl impression. The next hour was spent on what Ted called Humanity 101. He coached Alanira on basic human interactions, explaining concepts like personal space, something Salaran royalty apparently didn't recognize, appropriate topics of conversation, which did not include comparing humans to primitive life forms, and the absolutely critical importance of keeping her alien identity secret. But why would I conceal my royal heritage? She demanded. On 17 planets, beings prostrate themselves at the mere mention of my dynasty. On this planet they call the psychiatric ward. Ted countered, just trust me. Earth isn't ready for aliens, especially purple ones with weird crowns. My pigmentation is not weird, she sniffed. It's the epitome of Salaran genetic perfection. Ted found himself studying that perfect purple skin, the way it caught the light, the subtle shift of those swirling patterns when she was annoyed, which seemed to be often around him. It's actually really beautiful, he admitted before he could stop himself, but still definitely not human. Something in his tone made her pause. She looked at him with those swirling magenta eyes, and for a moment, Ted felt like she was seeing right through him. You find my form aesthetically pleasing, she stated, not as a question but as an observation. Not exactly, Ted stammered, heat rising to his face. I meant objectively from a biological standpoint. A smile curved her lips. On Curran, being forthright about attraction is considered a sign of emotional intelligence. Yeah, well, on Earth it's considered a fast track to awkward conversations, Ted muttered, grabbing his truck keys. Come on, Your Highness, time to introduce you to small-town Wyoming. The Paradise Tan and Nail Salon occupied a storefront between the Blackwater Pharmacy and Gus's Hunting Supplies. As Ted held the door for Alanira, he prayed that Mrs. Petrovic, the elderly Ukrainian woman who owned the place, wouldn't ask too many questions about his companion. No such luck. Theodore Wilson, Mrs. Petrovic's accented voice boomed across the salon. Who is this gorgeous creature? You never tell me you have a girlfriend. Three women under a hairdryer swiveled to stare at them. Ted felt his face burning. She's not I am Ali, Alanira interrupted smoothly, extending her hand as Ted had taught her. I am visiting from overseas. Mrs. Petrovic clasped Alanira's hand in both of hers, apparently not noticing the unusual skin tone under the salon's forgiving pink lighting. Such beauty, such height, you must be a model. Yes, yes, Alanira agreed readily. I model royal regalia and ceremonial battle armor for the elite forces of runway shows. Ted cut in European fashion, very avant-garde stuff. Mrs. Petrovic nodded knowingly. I can see such exotic features. What can I do for this beautiful couple today? Before Ted could correct her assumption, Alanira stepped forward. I require your ultraviolet radiation chamber, maximum intensity. Mrs. Petrovic blinked. You want a tanning bed, but sweetheart, your skin is already so uniquely colored. Ted jumped in, medical condition, doctor's orders, UV therapy. Mrs. Petrovic's face softened with sympathy. My nephew has psoriasis, 20 minutes in bed too. Yes, I give you a privacy discount. As Mrs. Petrovic led them to the back room, Ted whispered to Alanira, Not bad, princess, you're getting the hang of this human interaction thing. All Anra gave him a smug smile. I've negotiated peace treaties between silicon-based life forms and methane breathers. Your Earth customs are primitive but not incomprehensible. The tanning room was small, with a large mechanical bed dominating the space. Mrs. Petrovic demonstrated the controls, then left them alone with a wink that made Ted want to sink through the floor. So, do you just lie in there with the crown exposed to the light? Ted asked when they were alone. Aura was already removing her baseball cap, her crown gleaming dully in the fluorescent lighting. Yes, the photonic receptors will absorb the radiation. It won't fully recharge the system, but it should provide enough energy to run diagnostics. She began unbuttoning the flannel shirt. Whoa, Ted, he turned away quickly. What are you doing, removing these restrictive garments? The radiation must reach my epidermal energy nodes as well. At least wait until I'm out of the room. Your human modesty is inefficient, Alanira replied, but he heard the rustling of closed paws. You may exit. Ted escaped to the waiting area where Mrs. Petrovic immediately cornered him. Such an exotic girlfriend, how did you meet? She, showed up in my bathroom, Ted answered truthfully, then winced at how it sounded. Mrs. Petrovic cackled. You young people with your dating apps, in my day, we met at church socials. For the next 20 minutes, Ted endured knowing looks from the salon patrons and Mrs. Petrovic's increasingly personal questions about his relationship with Ali. By the time the tanning bed buzzed, he was ready to sprint for the exit. When Alanra emerged fully dressed, thankfully her crown was glowing noticeably brighter. There was a new vibrancy to her movements, a subtle radiance to her skin. The preliminary charge was successful, she murmured as they left. I can now access basic diagnostic functions. Great, Ted replied, nodding goodbye to Mrs. Petrovic. Everyone in town thinks I'm dating a purple European model, but hey, at least your crown's feeling better. As they walked toward his truck, Ted realized something unexpected. He didn't mind the misunderstanding. There was a certain pride in walking beside Alanra, in having this extraordinary being choose his protection. For a guy whose romantic history consisted mainly of scattered first dates and one disastrous 8-month relationship that ended when his girlfriend took a job in Denver, being linked to someone like Alanira was not unpleasant. even if she was an alien refugee with a malfunctioning crown and imperial attitude problems.